Dear sisters and brothers in Christ Jesus, today is the 32nd Sunday in Ordinary Time. And the Gospel passage we reflect upon today is from St. Mark's Gospel, chapter 12, verses 38 to 44. And that's a very famous story, incident, which generally is known as the widow's mite. What the poor widow contributes into the treasury of the temple. However, our deeper analysis will show that this is not about giving. This is not about tithing or contribution. This is more about the heart of the giver. It is more about the generosity of the heart. Let us see how the gospel proceeds. As we know, Jesus is in Jerusalem, and he knows his destiny of crucifixion, suffering, and death. That means his days are numbered. But he courageously, boldly goes on teaching the nature of true religion, which involves naturally fighting with the scribes and the Pharisees, because Jesus was always against their hypocrisy. Today's gospel passage also begins with such an argument about them, against them, where Jesus says, "Beware of the scribes who like to go about in long robes, to have salutations in the marketplaces, and the best places in gatherings. But their actions are wrong. They devour the homes of widows even." After this teaching, Jesus is inside the temple, sitting opposite to the treasury. And so many people come and put their contribution in the treasury, a lot of money. But then comes a poor widow, slowly, silently, unnoticed by many people. And she puts in 2 copper coins. And Jesus sees that. A widow in the Old Testament time was a poor, helpless, powerless person. A woman actually had no role, no power in the society as such. As a child, she was expected to be taken care of by the father. As a wife, she would be taken care of by the husband. And as a mother, by the son. And a widow had nobody. So that means she was really helpless, dependent upon the mercy of the community. That's why the prophets very often warns people against doing anything against them, but ask them to take care of the widows. But the Hebrew word for widow also has a meaning to be empty, to be silent. As a widow was a silent person, a voiceless person. In the case of this widow, the only noise one could hear was possibly the voice, the sound of the 2 copper coins in her wallet. And when she dropped them in the treasury, they also fell silent, complete silence in the case of this widow. But Jesus heard that silence. That silence was possibly much louder than all the noises, the sounds of the big amount of money that the people were putting in the treasury. Jesus heard it. Dear sisters and brothers, that is the first message for us today. God sees what people fail to see, what they overlook or they ignore. God sees everything. When Jesus says in Luke's Gospel chapter 12 verse 7, "Every hair of your head is numbered," how can he miss a good deed that comes out of the heart of a person? How can he not reward something, a good action done by a person? When Jesus said, "Even if you give a cup of cold water to one of these little ones, you will have your reward." God notices everything. The others all notice, the big amounts of money pouring into the treasury, even the disciples. And these people made sure that people see that they are putting in a lot of money. But Jesus was touched by the little amount of money. Yes, God sees what people overlook or ignore. Even when nobody else appreciates, rewards you for what you did, even if they actually so small, little, when it comes out of your heart for love of God, He rewards it. He sees everything that you do. The second message, God's norm of measuring the merit of our actions are different from ours. We normally count how much we give, what we do. But God checks how we do, why we give, the attitude with which we give, the attitude with which we do something. It is not the amount, it is not the quantity that matters, but it is the inner disposition that we have, with which we do certain things. In spite of who we are, in spite of the littleness of our actions, of our contributions, we can be the best giver, the greatest giver, when it comes from our heart. What else could prompt Jesus to say that this woman put in more than all the others, when what she put in was very little? Jesus noticed the other people bringing a lot of money, but He did not praise them anything. He was silent, because He knew it was their duty to do that. When God had given them in abundance, they were expected to be generous to others, generous to God. That is why St. Luke's Gospel chapter 12 verse 48 says, "From those to whom much is given, much will be demanded back." If God has given us in abundance, plentiful, we are expected to return in the same amount. That's what Pope Francis always exhorts the rich people, the rich countries, to take care of the poor, because God has given them. If God has given me in abundance, I am expected to do more. What the amount I give, what other people do, is not the criterion of what I do. To say, I have given as the other people are giving, I have prayed more than the other people are praying, that is not the norm. If God has given, we have to repay accordingly. That would mean the real norm of giving is how much sacrifice it involves, how much pain, how much hurt it causes me. Real giving involves sacrifice. Real giving involves pain. So give until it hurts. Give until it pains. That is what Jesus is looking into. That's why He said, this poor widow gave everything on which she was living on. You have heard the story of a pig and a hen who were walking by a church, and there was a notice, contribute to the cause of the poor. And the hen said, this is a good idea. Shall we give them some egg and some ham? And the pig replied, that is good. But from your part, that is just a donation. But from me, that's a real sacrifice. The danger of many families today, especially many rich families, is they are willing to give to their children whatever they ask for, but without any sacrifice. A sacrifice of their time, a sacrifice of their presence. And later on they complain that the children do not care for the parents. What is missing is this, the sacrificial aspect of giving. The third point, As William Barclay says, real giving to God is a reckless giving. It's a reckless giving without counting, without calculating. We give completely to God and we don't count, calculate, if I give this much, what will remain for me? What will be my future? What about my school fees? When God called Abraham and asked him to sacrifice his only son, Abraham did not calculate. He did not ask, what about my children, my descendants? What about your promise? He was willing to give recklessly, without counting. That is a real giving. If I give this much, what will happen to my family? It is not lack of planning. It is trusting in God, God's providence, who can give us much more than we ask for. St. Paul says in his letter to the Ephesians chapter 2, chapter 3, verse 20. It is trusting in God and seeking His kingdom first, knowing He can do everything. He can take care of us in everything. So dear sisters and brothers in Christ, the Gospel passage invites us today to remember God sees every good action of ours that comes from our heart. He calculates, He checks our inner attitude. If we are willing to give to Him whatever we have, until it pains us, He will reward us, even when they go unnoticed by people. Let us therefore learn to be generous before God and for His people, knowing He sees everything. May the Lord bless all of us. Amen.